Hello, podcasters. Welcome to the Royal Rota, your weekly podcast from ITV on all things royal. And it has been a very royal week this week. One big story, well, two big stories. One is the Sussexes and the Cambridges, the two boys, coming together to unveil the Diana statue. And the other is the Queen being in Scotland.
Yeah, two big stories. So we've been all over the place this week, haven't we? We started the week up in Scotland and we finished it down in London yesterday for the statue unveiling.
Yeah, and that was quite a moment, I think, wasn't it? I mean, there's a lot of focus on the relationship between William and Harry, but equally, it's a moment to pause and reflect and remember about all the, the impacts. Princess Diana has her supporters and her detractors, of course, but the impact that she had on national life and the life of the monarchy during that period. And let's remember, she died at 36 years of age. And yesterday, as we record this, or Thursday, the 1st of July, she would have turned 60.
Yeah, a very poignant day, I think, and one that I think they actually handled incredibly well, given that, they know how much the spotlight was on them and how much focus there was on their relationship. I thought actually they handled it incredibly well. And I'm sure it was a sort of, I know it was a celebration of her life and a chance for people to reflect on the work that she had done. But for them, it's their mother, and it must have been a very difficult and personal.
So we will talk about in this podcast who was there, how it happened, how it unfolded, what the media arrangements were, where the public were, whether you can see it, when you can see it, and all the rest of it. So that's all to come, as well as the interviews that I did with the sculptor, with the garden designer, and of course a lovely chap who was in the garden and used to work in the garden when Princess Diana used to go and visit there before her death in 1997. So a whole bunch of content coming your way, plus a full rundown of what went on in Scotland this week during Holyrood week, Royal week, or Scotland week, whatever you call it. I've had lots of commentary on social media about never heard that name, how dare you say that's the name. That didn't make the name up, that is the name. It's called Holyrood Week. Now, no one says you have to have heard of it, no one says you have to agree with it, no one says you have to use it, but that's the name.
It is the name.
I mean, so many people, how dare you call this Scotland Week? It's like, well, that's what it's called. I didn't make it up.
A week in Scotland.
A week in Scotland, when the Queen goes there, it's called Scotland Week. It happens every single year. It didn't happen last year because of COVID, and it's called Holyrood Week or Scotland Week or Royal Week. That's its name. I mean, I was on Twitter going, but that's what it's called. I'm not making this stuff up. You might not have heard of it. I had people saying, I've lived in Scotland for 56 years. I've never heard of it. Well, great, but that's what it's called.
Will I go through the rest of the list?
Do you get my point? Have I made the point? Have I made the point? Good. Right. On that note, do Scotland, do Wales, do Diana, do everything else, do Wimbledon, do go for it. Robinson's Royal Rundown is coming your way.
So as we've already previewed, we will give you at great length the statue unveiling of Princess Diana that happened yesterday. We'll also go through all the engagements at Scotland Week, and there's some other things to chat about. First of all, Prince George was seen in the Royal Box for a very big match for England's football team, England versus Germany, earlier this week.
You had to read that. You had to go England versus who do they play again?
England
Germany, which we watched at the car park in Scotland, but we'll tell you more about that later.
Did. The Queen, a busy week for the Queen. She's not only been up in Scotland, she has an audience today with Angela Merkel, and she's been out and about at the Royal Windsor Horse Show, which is a favourite for her. Prince Harry back in town for the unveiling of the Princess Diana statue, but he also attended the Well Child Awards, which is a very special day for him as their patron. And Princess Eugenie, we got to see some pictures this week of baby August, because she took him out and about.
To see the elephants.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Right. Okay, busy week. So let's crack on, because I don't think we should beat around the bush. The main story of the week, I know the monarch was in Scotland, but I think, most people will agree the main royal story of the week was Prince Harry being back in the UK to unveil this this long-planned moment in the sunken garden at Kensington Palace to unveil the statue to his mother, a statue that both he and William commissioned in 2017 on the anniversary, the 20th anniversary of her death. And yesterday, Thursday, the 1st of July, she would have turned 60 years old. My, where has that time gone?
I know. And so the unveiling took place yesterday afternoon in the sunken garden, and it was a very small and intimate group of people that attended that ceremony, wasn't it? There were the two princes, Harry and William, Diana's siblings, her 3 siblings, committee members that had worked on the statue, and then the sculptor, the garden designer, and some of the gardeners that look after the beautiful sunken garden. I mean, they've done the most spectacular job, haven't they?
Such a nice place. I mean, we were lucky enough to be in there. We weren't, I mean, we'll tell you all about what happened, but we weren't in there when it was being unveiled. We weren't in there when William and Harry were in there. Our cameras were allowed in there, but we were invited in as soon as they'd left to talk to the sculptor and all the rest of it. Perhaps we should start with him, the guy who designed it. Also someone you might well recognize his work, because if you've ever used a coin, we're not using them quite as much these days because of COVID, but if you've ever used a coin either in the UK or in any Commonwealth country that carries the Queen's effigy, well, it was made by Ian Rank-Broadley, who is the sculptor of the Diana statue, and he's also in charge of the Queen's head and all those coins, which is, and he just kind of just said it, yeah, that was me, I did that, you know. Yeah, I did that. Made a bronze statue of the Queen that sits outside the Supreme Court, you know. What will I do tomorrow? Anyway, so I mean, I tell you what, before we hear from him, let's just have a look at the statue in detail. If you're watching on YouTube, we always say this, we're going to show you the pictures now. If you're not watching on YouTube, then go to our Instagram page, ITV News Royals, or actually any of our ITV outputs, the news website, the Twitter feed, anything, you'll see the statue. And interestingly, it was Diana. He told me sort of modelled on the person that she was in the years before she died. So we're talking mid-1990s here. With 3 children, no children in particular, children of no nationality, of no particular charity, but just to represent, I think they said, her sort of her enduring work with future generations, wasn't it?
Yeah, they said that the portrait and style of the dress was based on the final period of her life as she gained confidence in her role as an ambassador for humanitarian causes, and aims to convey her character and compassion.
Yes, character and compassion. So, you know, people always have, I think people always have different views of statues, like that's not a great likeness, that she didn't look like that. I mean, whatever else. But as you'll hear, the sculptor, Mr. Rank-Broadley, told me that he felt like he knew Diana by the end of the process because of the way in which he does his work. He gets pictures, he has conversations with William and Harry, he speaks to the siblings who were there. So that's Charles Spencer, her brother, Lady Sarah McCorquodale and Lady Jane Fellows were all there, Diana's 2 sisters and brother, talking to all these people. And he did tell me, as you'll hear in this bit of the interview that we'll play, and we'll play you quite a lot of it actually, because he's the man that you know, designed this. It's really worth hearing what he had to say. So this is my conversation that I had with the sculptor of the Diana statue in the sunken garden of Kensington Palace moments after it was unveiled. Just explain to me what you were trying to achieve from the moment that you were commissioned to make this in 2017.
I think uppermost in my mind was, in fact, to actually do something for the princes. I mean, you know, for all that the princess was a very public figure and in many respects an icon, that she was somebody's mother. So I paid the greatest heed to both princes and what they had to say. And in many ways it was a collaborative effort. They made a huge contribution. And in many ways I could say that the sculpture belongs to them as well. They helped make it.
You mentioned quite what involvement the 2 princes had. Just explain how that works, because from the moment of the commission through to today's unveiling, I mean, what kind of involvement have they had in the whole process?
Well, unfortunately, I never knew the princess. I never met her, so I was reliant on what friends and family would say. And one gets a flavour. You know, I mean, there might be anecdotes, reminiscences, and then there might be particular views. So, yeah, they contributed in that way. They described their mother. And in many ways, you know, there are private moments and stuff that were related. One certainly got the feeling that she has an enormous sense of fun and playing jokes. And, you know, that helped to create a person, so that when I'm on my own in the studio and I'm just modelling the clay, I got a feeling I'm beginning to know somebody. And towards the end of the commission, I really felt as though I knew a Diana.
Standing back and looking at it now in its setting, in this beautiful sunken garden, the place we know meant a lot to the princess herself. How are you feeling? Proud of the work that you've collaboratively achieved?
Oh yes, very much so. But I think again, it's something which, we did together. So it's not simply my achievement. I think this is something that we all share. I think the thing is that to create an image, and in many ways bronze confers immortality by the very nature that it will last 1,000 or 2,000 years. So the image has got to be right, and it has to be right in their eyes and in the family's eyes.
And finally, the two princes share the grief of their mother's loss. They've both spent more than 20 years with the absence of a maternal figure. Do you hope today might be so important to them that it might help them overcome some of the difficulties they've had in more recent times?
I wouldn't like to say on that.
Do you hope that the statue might just be an important moment for them as brothers?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the fact that their mother is there, in a real physical sense. Perhaps in the evening when the grounds are shut, they could easily come here for a moment of quiet reflection, and I hope that would give them some sort of comfort or solace.
And you'll note at the end there was a pause when I asked him about what effect he think it might or might not have had on William and Harry's relationship. Clearly, I mean, let's just be all open here. Clearly, we don't know this, but clearly they've had conversations with the communications team, like, if any journalist asks you X question, then don't answer. But I think, as journalists, we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't at least attempt to answer that question. And it's perfectly his right not to want to answer it. And he didn't. But he did kind of say at the end there, didn't he, that Princess Diana does now exist, as he put it, in a physical form, and it might be a good place for William or Harry when he's in the UK to come on their own, maybe late in the evening, and pause and reflect on, perhaps reflect on what went wrong in their relationship with their brothers.
Yeah, he handled it very diplomatically, but he did say that he hoped that the garden could, and the statue in the garden could potentially provide some solace for them, to, like you say, come down when it's quiet and spend some time there. And it is a really spending time in there yesterday. It's very peaceful. It doesn't feel like you're in the centre of London. It's really quiet. It's very tranquil, and you can imagine it's a good place to be, quite reflective.
Given it's physically in one of the busiest royal parks in central London, given that the sunken garden is literally meters away from that main sort of thoroughfare, the main footpath that goes from the north to the south of the park, I just found it was like being in an oasis of calm, wasn't it? I mean, so to be clear, you cannot see this if you just walk up the path through Kensington Palace, past the frontage of the palace. I'm sure many people have seen. You can't actually see the statue. You physically have to go and walk around the top of the sunken garden. So you can't go into the sunken garden. You can't stand by that pool where we were doing all those interviews, but you do get a very good view through are they vines or whatever that hedge thing is? I'm not much of a gardener myself, but you get good views of the garden, and I'm sure, and I don't know today, and with all the publicity yesterday, I'm sure that will be a major focus.
Yeah, I've already seen on Twitter this morning there are people that have gone to see the statue, and of course it will be hugely popular, I imagine, to draw lots of people to come and visit it. But we know it was a favourite place for Princess Diana, the sunken garden, and she used to stop, didn't she, and often chat to some of the gardeners that worked in there. They said when she was either on her way out on a run or on her way back, she would always sort of stop and see how they were and check in with them. And I'm not surprised it was somewhere that she loved spending time. I think we both recognised yesterday what a beautiful place it was.
And it was something we spoke to the deputy head gardener about. So he's now the deputy head gardener of historic royal palaces. Now, we might have told you this before, historic royal palaces look after what's called the unoccupied royal palaces, like Kew Gardens, like the bit of Kensington Palace that William and Kate don't live in, like where else? Tower of London, I think they look after as well, don't they?
Hampton Court.
Hampton Court Palace, yes. So he's now their deputy head gardener, but 24, 25 years ago, in the years before Diana died, he remembers working in that garden and her going out for jogs in the morning, popping back after she'd been out running, checking that they were all right, taking an interest in what they were doing. And that's why many people saying Kensington Palace said in a statement themselves yesterday it was one of Princess Diana's favourite places to be. So have a listen to my chat with Graham, a lovely chap, really, really nice. And listen for the little bit where he said Diana used to come back from her run listening to ABBA songs. And he, for one, doesn't much care for ABBA. What went through your mind today when you saw Diana's two boys come here and, unveil that beautiful sculpture in the garden that's been designed to house it properly? What was going through your mind?
Well, some lots of memories, lots of flashbacks of when people were younger, long ago. Times when I was a lot younger in this garden as a young 20-year-old lad, still learning my trade in this garden. So lots of flashbacks and memories, but incredibly moving moment. And to be present here in this garden on that occasion, just incredible.
Because you surely remember William and Harry when they would come to this garden as just little boys.
Yes, that's true. Not very often, but they would get pushed around with Nanny now and again into the garden, and we'd see them grow up in the gardens here.
And today, 24 years now since they lost their mother. I mean, it's a really emotional moment for them.
Well, goodness, yeah, I can't speak for them, and I can only sort of give you my views, and that's not really for me to answer. I think it's just an incredible moment when they pulled that cord off the statue to reveal such a wonderful thing. There was a great, I thought, unity there.
You can kind of see why Princess Diana liked it here so much, because there's just a busy public footpath behind us here, and yet it's peaceful, it's tranquil, it's calm, it's private.
Well, it's private sometimes. Early in the morning it's very private, and we used to start very early at 7, and it would be very nice and quiet then, and it would be an ideal time for the princess to go for a jog with her friends or just a walk sometimes. So it was a lovely, quiet, peaceful time. But once it became 9, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, it became a very busy space, so we just got on with our work then. But that moment, those sort of golden moments at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning when it was very peaceful and you could just hear the birds chirping in the background, and the princess would come skipping down those steps behind me, singing some ABBA song, which I couldn't stand, but but we would be honoured by how simple she was and how interested she was in what we were doing.
Lovely guys, I'm sure you just heard, and I think there was a moment when he was getting quite emotional, wasn't he? Memories were clearly flooding back for him. He clearly was someone who adored Princess Diana, as a boss, as a member of the royal family. And he was very reflective, wasn't he, about that moment and about seeing the boys and about being honoured to be there.
Yeah, I mean, he was part of a very small group that were invited, but really lovely. I thought that the gardeners and the garden designer were invited yesterday because, they had created this not only beautiful garden for the statue to sit in, but also they did know Diana and they did have a link to her. And obviously, if you look through the plant list, it includes plants that were, some of Princess Diana's favourites, like the forget-me-not. In fact, there were 5 gardeners. They spent a total of 1,000 hours working on planting. Over 4,000
plants
being planted. Isn't that astonishing?
Yeah, it really, really is actually. So, again, go on our Instagram. You'll see some pictures, or if you're on YouTube, we'll show you them right now. That Kensington Palace released a whole bunch of pictures of the garden looking spectacular. And they were talking about how they redesigned it. And I mean, I can't quite remember what it was like before, but we went in there when it was called the White Garden, which they did for the 20th anniversary of her death, because of, you know, to make a peaceful, tranquil kind of place. But they sort of reworked it. They took out some of the, don't forget, this is where Harry and Meghan had their engagement pictures. They took out some of the water features from the pond, so that it was just like still water and reflective. They moved the lawn down to be around them, so you know you might see this in some of the pictures and the imagery. And they talked about it becoming a calmer and more reflective setting for the statue of Diana and those three children.
Yeah, and the sculpture itself, it's an impressive sculpture. It's 1 1/4 life size.
Yeah, and it's not on a raised up on a massive plinth. But anyway, we're talking about the garden. Have a listen to the garden designer who and why he sort of redid the garden to look like it did. This is Pip Morrison. We were perched on a wall in the sunken garden, his beautiful planted flowers behind us. It was quite a pleasant little moment sitting there talking to Pip. So here he is.
So the garden originally was divided into quite narrow bands of lawn and border and paving in a sort of repeated Edwardian pattern. And when we were thinking about how to change the design, we didn't want to lose that character that the princess knew from when she came here, but wanted to sort of vary it more. So we've actually changed it so that the lower level is just lawn, and then have paving on the middle level as a path to go that people can walk around the garden, and then to have a much bigger more generous flower border on the top level.
Talking of the flowers, I hear you've planted quite a few flowers, many thousands, including some that meant a lot to the princess herself.
Yes. Early on with the princess, we had a lot of conversations about what kind of flowers she liked and what was special. So lily of the valley with the scent, and forget-me-nots and peonies and roses. They know their plants.
So we've spoken about, you know, the statue, and Lizzie just in front of the statue. I mean, actually on the side it said unveiled by her sons, didn't it? I think
on the bottom of the statue, around sort of the front, it says the date. It says Diana, Princess of Wales, and then down one side it says unveiled by her sons. And then in front, on a paving stone, it's engraved with an extract of a poem called The Measure of a Man, which featured in the programme for her memorial service in 2007, and they've changed a word in that poem from man to woman. So it says of this woman as a woman regardless of birth.
So, I mean, we've spoken about the statue, we've spoken about the garden, we've spoken about the pond or the pool, we've spoken about Kensington Palace. But I mean, the other question that everyone was asking yesterday was, what does this do to Harry and William's relationship? It's no secret that it's broken. It's no secret that it didn't repair itself after Prince Philip's funeral, which was the last time they were seen together in public. Big question then, was this the moment that they would be able to put their differences to one side? I think things are so badly wrong that the answer to that is no, but it might well be a trigger or a moment for them to start looking at what went wrong. And I'm positive that that's what Diana would want them to do, to try and repair their relationship.
Yeah, a lot of damage has been done, hasn't it? And I think, you know, while everyone hopes that they can repair their relationship, it's not going to happen overnight, and it's certainly not going to happen on one day. But, you know, I think yesterday they did put their mother first, and she was, you know, first and foremost for the unveiling, and they did put their differences aside, and, you know, they looked actually to be getting on as they arrived and in the garden and for the unveiling itself. But, you know, of course, they were well aware that all the cameras were on them and everyone was scrutinising sort of that body language. But you have to hope that if anything is going to bring them back together, that it is potentially, this could be a starting point.
Yeah, indeed. And actually, when they arrived, they were talking to one another. I mean, there was no TV camera on them as they sort of walked up, but there was a stills camera, a news, whatever you call it, camera. And I was talking to the guy who took them. He was showing me the pictures, and actually they take so many of them these days, like digitally. It's not like they take just 3. It was almost like looking at TV pictures, because he's scrolling through them, and they would look like they were sharing a joke, having a conversation. I mean, yes, of course it might all been put on for the cameras. Yes, of course they might say, well, let's just talk. And no, they didn't sit there in silence. But nevertheless, I think most people were relieved to see that they were at least able to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And they moved around the engagement together as a pair, and sort of they started by greeting family members and committee members, etc., before unveiling the statue together. So I think it was nice to see, but I think if people think that's the end of it on one day, I think things are worse.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they clearly do need to patch up, but Harry seemed to be really pleased to see his aunties and uncles. Remember that when he first arrived and he was talking to Lady Jane, Lady Sarah, Earl Spencer, he definitely seemed very relaxed, very pleased to see Diana's brother and sister. The other person that was there, interestingly, and you can see this if we show you the pictures now, but I put it on my Twitter if you want to have a very quick look at it, was Jamie Lowther Pinkington. Now he was Harry and William's private secretary from about 2005 to 2013. And he's also been in touch with the boys ever since. He's on the statue committee. He was the chair of the statue committee. So of course he was going to be there, but he's also someone who wants the boys to put their differences to one side and reconcile. And I think he's the kind of guy who would try to make the most of them being in the same room, or at least on the same side of the Atlantic, as opposed to on opposite sides of the Atlantic.
Yeah, Jamie, as you say, has known the boys for a very long time and is still very close to both of them, and will, as much as anybody, want to sort of help. But he is in a good position, unlike a lot of people, he's in a good position to be able to help them maybe repair their relationship.
Yeah, and to all extents, I mean, this was an event that they wanted to keep as private and as intimate as they possibly could. And when you count up how many members of the press were in that sunken garden, it was 4. Our camera, an international camera, a photographer, and a writer. That was it. And actually, that's probably a good thing, because I mean, there's no way that either of them, but particularly Harry, would want to see a bank of cameras all there clicking away like he perhaps remembers seeing at the time of his engagement photo call. So, it was as low-key as they could possibly make it. No speeches, no members of the public, literally no media, bar those 4 we've just mentioned, and just a couple of statements that came out towards the end of the day. Yeah,
we were told that the event had been sort of scaled back due to COVID, and therefore the media arrangements had been were put in place to sort of reflect the tone of the occasion and also the size of it. So, 4 members of the press to 13 members of the group that were there to see the statue unveiling. Any more, it would probably been a little bit overwhelming with press people attending. But I think no doubt it did make it easier for them having a smaller group of press there. They knew anyway that the lenses were on them, watching kind of how things were, that having more cameras there would have made that even worse.
So go and see it. I mean, you don't need a ticket. You can literally go to Kensington Palace, just walk around the garden. It is available for you to view, to see. Let us know what you think. I certainly think it was a real pleasure being in that garden. Beautiful lawn, by the way. I wish my lawn looked like that. It was absolutely green as anything.
You said Harry and William put out a joint statement afterwards.
Oh, yeah, do you want to read it?
Written statement in a press release, and it's quite rare to hear from the William and Harry together these days. But it was
well, let's wrap up the whole topic of conversation, and you read that, and then I think that's a good place to leave it.
So they said, today, on what would have been our mother's 60th birthday, we remember her love, strength and character, qualities that made her a force for good around the world, changing countless lives for the better. Every day we wish she were still with us, and our hope is that this statue will be seen forever as a symbol of her life and legacy. Thank you to Ian Rank Broadley, Pip Morrison and their team for their outstanding work. to the friends and donors who helped make this happen, and to all those around the world who keep our mother's memory alive.
So I hope we've covered that story in as much detail, with as much compassion and objective analysis as you could possibly get. That's what we try and do here in the time that we've got, and having had that sort of first-hand experience of being there on Thursday. So a good place to leave it, I think, with William and Harry's rare joint statement. Let's go to Scotland. Let's fly north.
Scotland or Harry and Wellchild?
Scotland. Let's go to Scotland. We'll talk about what Harry did, in his sort of after his quarantine period. The Queen was now this story that kind of tickled us, didn't it? Because here was the Queen visiting Scotland. Now, when you think of Scotland's national drink, what do you think?
Whiskey.
When you think of Scotland's other national drink, what do you now know it is?
Iron Brew.
Iron Brew. Have you ever tried Iron Brew before Monday?
No, I don't.
No, at the Iron Brew factory, I told you not to say that because you would probably insult the entire working population of the factory.
They looked absolutely delighted to be able to see me take my first sip, and I had cans of Iron Brew just sort of coming at me. I'm in
lined up,
and then we've got this one, and then you can try this one. So yeah, I had my first taste.
Right. So now, if you're in Scotland, you don't need any introduction. If you're in England, probably not. You probably know that the Scottish people love to drink Iron Brew. If you are in the military, as William told the Queen, you'll know about Iron Brew because, as he said to the Queen, my army colleagues from Scotland used to drink it for breakfast. If you're not in any of those places, actually Russia, what did we learn? It's a massively consumed drink in Russia as well, Iron Brew. Just Google Iron Brew in Russia and you'll see it written in Russian. It's quite fascinating. Anyway, if you don't know what it is, it's like an orange coloured fizzy drink. I think, what do they call it in the US? Soda.
Bright orange
soda, fizzy drink, as we say here. Which is made in a place called Cumbernauld, which is near Glasgow in Scotland. Now, we are told, and we were shown, that it has a very secret ingredient that Mr. Barr from the company AG Bar, the founders, comes along, was it once a month, and makes up a whole new batch from the secret ingredients of 32 things that even the Queen didn't get to find out about. Now, the Queen knows a lot of secrets of state. She's been told a lot of secret things and knows things that we never will, but she was not told the ingredients of Iron Brew.
No, we like this, didn't we? That there are 3 people that know the ingredients for this, what was in this little bottle, and even the Queen wasn't getting her hands on that recipe.
No, she certainly wasn't. So why was she there? Well, she was there because she was starting Scotland Week, and as explained at the top, Scotland Week is a name. Holyrood Week, that's what it's called. You may not like it, you may not have heard of it, but that's its name. And she was in Scotland for that week when she does all of her visits in Scotland. Now, I suppose there is an argument, like she's the Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Therefore, a lot of people, maybe justifiably on Twitter, were saying, we only get a week. But I think it's Scotland Week, but it's not the only week that she goes to Scotland. That's the difference, isn't it? It's a week in which she dedicates all of her engagements. She stays at the Palace of Holyrood House. She has the ceremony of the keys, where she's handed the keys, ceremonial keys, to Edinburgh. And that's Scotland Week. That's what it's called.
That's what it's called. And it's, as you say, it's the full week of engagements up there, celebrating all things Scottish, and she stays at the official residence, the Palace of Holyrood House. But yes, she's up there throughout the year in normal times, obviously.
For official engagements, yes, and also Prince of Wales, Camilla, William and Kate were there recently as well, so the whole royal family go there. So I mean, in response to someone on Twitter who said this to me, well, I said, well, actually, if you work out the population of the UK, which I did sit down and do over breakfast one morning while staying in Edinburgh, the royal family should spend about 8% of their time in Scotland, because there's 5 million people in Scotland, about 66 million people in the UK. So, you know, if you're going to divide your time up by size of population, then the royal family should spend 8% of their time in Scotland. Incidentally, if you want to work out the other figures, it's 5% in Wales and about 3% in Northern Ireland. But just, you know, I wasn't bored at breakfast or anything. So that's how much time they should spend based on population. And therefore, the rest of the time, when you think about it, you sort of kind of forget how big England is as a population, as part of the UK. You know, something like 55 million of the 66 million people live in England. So it might be why they spend obviously more time south of the border, as it's known. But anyway, that's Scotland Week. So
of visits though, William and Kate, as you say, were up there quite recently. So I thought it was interesting that it was Prince William that she spent the first 2 days of her Scotland Week, Holyrood Week up there with, that she'd taken him up there. And there have been reports after William and Kate's visit last time that they were perhaps going to spend more time up in Scotland doing engagements in a bid to sort of save the union. So I thought it was quite interesting that
but that's an interesting debate in itself, isn't it? Is it the royal family's job to save the union? Because, you know, whether or not Scotland becomes an independent country or whether it stays as part of the United Kingdom is a political matter and not one for the royal family.
No, but discuss. Well, yes, and but you know, they don't have to say anything political. They don't have to get involved in politics, and nor did they on any of their visits. You know, William and Kate didn't get involved in politics.
But you kind of think, well, actually, they are currently, whatever, you know, the wishes in Scotland, and actually the polls show that the support for independence has slipped during the pandemic. But the polls, you know, show it's roughly 48-52 or 50-50 or whatever. It's about half and half. But maybe the royal family think, well, if we are currently the you know, the monarchy represents all of the United Kingdom, then we have to go on representing all of the United Kingdom until such a time that changes, and it hasn't yet changed, of course. And there's a whole other debate about, you know, the SNP, the Scottish National Party, which runs the government in Scotland. They want to keep the Queen as head of state if there were to be a yes vote for independence. Now, that is not in itself a universally popular move amongst a lot of independent supporters who would much rather Scotland were a republic. But the SNP policy is that Scotland would keep the Queen as head of state, much like New Zealand does, a country of not dissimilar size, and much further away, of course. Canada keeps the Queen of head of state. So that's currently their position. So anyway, let's just show you the Queen meeting Nicola Sturgeon, because we've spoken about Iron Brew at great length. You've seen the Queen in the factory, and if you weren't watching on YouTube, then you know where to go to find them. ITV News Royals on Instagram. But let's just show you the Queen with Nicola Sturgeon and the entirety of their conversation that they had at the Palace of Holyrood House. We are never allowed to stay in for the whole thing, of course, but we do get the sort of chit chat at the top. So this is Her Majesty the Queen meeting the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, who is also the leader of the Scottish National Party, who wants to break away from the UK.
Good morning, Your Majesty. Very nice to be back again. Very nice to see you in person after such a long... Well, it is, and a year's gap is incredible. Absolutely. So come and take a seat. To have you back here. Still rather distant, I'm afraid. No, that's very wise. But you must be quite used to that.
We should just say, though, shouldn't we, that the meeting with the First Minister, that's not unusual. Whenever she's up in Scotland on Scotland Week, she would have an audience with the First Minister. So, you know, that's nothing unusual.
No, it's not. And actually, it's a point that we put to a professor of constitutional affairs from Edinburgh University about actually, you know, she meets the First Minister of Scotland all the time. But given that we've just had elections in Scotland to the Scottish Parliament, where the people of Scotland returned a majority for parties which support independence, in other words, mostly the SNP, but also a couple of Green members of the Scottish Parliament, that means it currently has a majority of elected representatives who support Scotland breaking away from the UK. So we spoke to the professor from Edinburgh University about that very point. It's not unusual for the Queen to meet the First Minister of Scotland, but with everything that's happened this year, today's meeting is more significant, isn't it?
So the constitutional situation is very fragile indeed, and it makes the royal family's position very difficult. They want to emphasise that Scotland's part of the UK. On the other hand, they don't want to be stepping into politics in a way that could backfire.
Later this afternoon, the Queen was at Stirling Castle. I see some lovely, there's one particular picture that caught our eye, which was of the Queen arriving in front of a portrait of herself, which I always find quite interesting when you've got the Queen from 30, 40 years ago with the Queen now. Again, that one you'll find on our Instagram page. But she was at Stirling Castle opening a museum. We had a very quick chat outside. I mean, here's just a quick flavour of a couple of people. We spoke about that very point. Should Scotland, if it were to be independent, become a republic, or should it keep the Queen as head of state? I mean, here's a very small flavour of some of the people we spoke to outside.
If Scotland's going to be independent, you think the Queen should or shouldn't be head of state?
She shouldn't be head of state anywhere. This is the whole of the UK. She spends a lot of time up here. She makes it no secret that she loves coming to Scotland as well. So I still think it's as valid as it ever was.
So Scotland Week, I mean, that was day 2 of Scotland Week. We've spoken about the Iron Brew factory. Prince William was also, I mean, it's not the Queen that did this, but Prince William went to a shipyard on the Clyde, the BAE Systems shipyards, to unveil. What did he do? It's HMS Glasgow, wasn't it? A Type 26 frigate or something that he was seeing being built.
He was, yeah, and meeting employees there. So yeah, he broke away from the Queen to do a solo engagement on the banks of the Clyde.
And speak about his grandfather, didn't he?
My family's affection for the Royal Navy is well known. And as I saw the work taking place here today, I was thinking of my grandfather, the Duke of Edinburgh. He'd been fascinated and very excited to see such advances in skills and technology being put into practice.
It was William who was kind of the chaperone, wasn't he, for the first 2 days? Then Princess Anne took over as chaperone for the next couple of days, including the visit to that sort of not children's farm, it was just children's meadow, a children's wood, wasn't it? And it was one of the last wild places in a very urban part of Glasgow.
Yeah, some really lovely pictures from that. So as you say, the Princess Royal joined the Queen for her final 2 days of Scotland Week. And there was one interesting visit, I thought. They visited the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute on Thursday. And the Queen made quite an interesting remark when she said that it does mean, they were talking about climate change. And she said, it does mean we're going to have to change the way we do things really in the end. And I thought that was interesting. You know, we've obviously heard a lot from her son, Prince Charles, and grandson, Prince William, their sort of passion for the environment. But to hear the Queen talking about it, and she knows that her words are being picked up, you know, she knows that people can hear her, and she knows the impact that she has when she says things. I just thought that was quite interesting. And she also, as she stepped out of the hybrid Land Rover, she remarked, "It's electric," as she arrived at the engagement. So
clearly been listening to her son over lunch, and her grandson as well, because Prince William is also taking on this environmental mantle. I mean, when Scotland Week, which is a thing, by the way, we don't say whether or not you should use it, but it is a thing. Scotland Week is the name, it's the official name. When Scotland Week was over, she was in the Windsor Horse Show on Thursday afternoon. I mean, she was literally on fire this week, the Queen, wasn't she? Like whizzing around Scotland, and then suddenly, bam, she's at the Windsor Horse Show.
Yeah, and you know, I know we say this a lot, but the Queen is 95, and you know, she and we said a while ago that when restrictions allowed, we would see her very much back out and about, and how much she'd missed sort of public life, and like all of us really, but we have seen her out and about an awful lot recently, and to start the week 4 full-on days in Scotland, engagements every day. She's then back, and she was at the Royal Windsor Horse Show, which she loves. She couldn't go last year, it was held virtually, but the Duke of Edinburgh had been president of the horse show since I think about 91. He used to compete there in carriage driving. The royals are always seen at the horse show, and she looked delighted to be back.
And Scotland Week, Windsor Horse Show.
Yeah, that's not
Chancellor of Germany. I mean, you know. Okay, look, she's had a full week. She doesn't have a week like this every week, but even so, as you say, 95 years old, that's quite remarkable. So Angela Merkel, who was actually stepping down as the Chancellor of Germany after a very, very long period in charge of politics in Germany, was on a final visit to the UK as Chancellor. She's seeing the Prime Minister as well, but this isn't a politics podcast, so we'll show you the royal part of her visit, which was at Windsor, where she met the Queen. There was a guard of honour. And she had a little chat with the Queen. I mean, what do they talk about, given that England played Germany in the football on Monday and knocked Germany out? I don't know what they would talk about, but maybe that's one of the topics.
Maybe the Queen told her it's coming home.
Maybe the Queen told her maybe she sang. I don't know. Who knows? So there we go. So there's some pictures of Angela Merkel in the UK for the last time. Busy week. Shall we do? We were talking about football. Should we do Prince George at the football?
Prince George at the football, yeah, with
Sweet,
Mum and Dad really sweet. So they were.
But why were so many people talking about whether or not he should have been wearing a tie?
Were they?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff on Twitter is, why is he in an England shirt? Why can't he wear just a jersey like everybody else? Why can't he have a T-shirt on? But he is in the VIP box, and David Beckham was in a tie.
Well, he was in the royal box, and everyone in there, bar Ed Sheeran, I think, was dressed in a suit and tie. And
I mean, what would have happened if he turned up in an England vest?
This is the thing. People always have something to say, don't they? If he turned up in a shirt, he would have been criticised for that. He turns up in a suit and tie looking immaculate, and people criticise that. So he can't win, but he looked like he was having a great time. And lots of people have said, is he our lucky mascot? Will he
of course. Yeah, I mean, if you can break the the omen of losing against Germany, then George can go to all the matches. In fact, George, do you fancy popping off to Rome this weekend for the England-Ukraine match? Although, of course, no one can go before you accuse me of encouraging you because of COVID, so don't go. Right, talking of children, what about baby August?
The
I never pronounce that one.
The life-size elephant sculptures that are in London's parks at the moment.
Which we covered last year, if you'll remember, when we interviewed the Duchess of Cornwall about it, because it's her late brother's charity, Mark Shan's charity, the Elephants Family.
Yeah, the elephant family that Princess Eugenie, she's a patron of, and they've got a campaign at the moment, which is what the elephant sculptures are part of, and the campaign's called Coexistence, and it's about encouraging people to coexist with nature. But these sculptures I went to see them the other day. They're amazing, incredibly impressive.
Have you not seen them already? Because some of us saw them when they were at Highgrove.
I know I think that's when I was in America, wasn't it?
Oh yes, you were working really hard in Florida on the American election. That's right. Well, those of us who went to Highgrove saw them being installed, and some of us spoke to the Duchess of Cornwall about them.
Moving on, baby August was introduced to his namesake, Assam August.
There we are. That's nice, isn't it? Worth seeing. Where was it? St James's Park or Green Park in London?
They're across lots of the different parks.
Okay. Well, when you see them, take some photos, share them with us, because it is it's a great charity as well, and really, really important to sort of work out that space between people and elephants, and to make sure that humans and elephants can coexist. We started with Harry. Should we end with Harry?
Let's end with Harry. He was at the Well Child Awards, and that's an awards for seriously ill children and young people. It's an amazing event, and
it's amazing work, isn't it?
A number of times, and we're always absolutely astounded by the kind of these amazing children and what they've achieved, and some really inspiring stories. But what was slightly different this year is that the event was a private garden party and afternoon tea at Kew Gardens in West London. So sadly we didn't get to go and cover it like we normally would, but yes, as you say, Prince Harry was there alongside some famous faces.
Ordinarily, yeah, you're right. Ordinarily, there would have been a Royal Rota system kick in to cover this, but so the video came from, I think, Well Child themselves, as did some of the photos. I do know that a guest, actually a one-time guest or a couple of time guest of this podcast, Emily Nash, went to cover it, because her magazine is part of or was one of the partners, or the media partner of the charity. So she actually went to the event, said Harry was on good form. He said hello to her, and that was him coming out of quarantine a day before the statue unveiling, which is the right time before anyone accuses him of not doing it properly, because he came here at the end of last week and spent his 5 days in quarantine, had his second negative test, and then went to Well Child. So well done to Well Child. You do amazing work.
And he did talk a little bit about new baby Lilibet, who's obviously at home in California with Meghan and big brother Archie. And the Duke said that 2 is definitely a juggle. And then talking about baby Lilibet, he said that they've been very lucky so far. She's very chilled and seems happy to just sit there while Archie is running around like crazy. So.
And Harry's probably been enjoying a few extra long sleeps while he's been here, because actually if you're quarantined and you can't go out the house, you can just catch up on all that sleep that you haven't been having because you've got 2 young children in the house. So you'll probably go back to a very tired Meghan.
Ed Sheeran, who was also at the event, the aforementioned Ed Sheeran, said to him that, you know, you're still in the trenches because it's obviously still very early days with baby Lilibet.
Oh, very much so. Yes, absolutely. So
he's been staying with cousin Princess Eugenie and Jack Brooksbank and baby.
Actually, maybe Eugenie just like got the baby and handed it over to Harry and said, "Here, you can have him for a night because we want some sleep." Tough times when you have young kids. So and the lack of sleep is one of the biggest challenges, as any new parent will tell you. Well, that was some week, wasn't it?
Some week, yeah. I think this, particularly the statue unveiling, that has been, you know, everyone has been sort of anticipating what's going to happen for quite some months, quite some build up to that.
You could kind of see the relief on the faces of the Kensington Palace team when it was sort of over, and they were like you could see them
and our faces, to be honest.
Breathing. Because actually, for quite a small event, as we've told you how many media were there, there was a lot of we won't bore you with how much organisation went into it. So anyway, that's what consumes a great deal of our time, those kind of things. We hope that you got the coverage of all those events that you came to this podcast, the coverage that you sought, the analysis that you expect. And if you didn't, well, apologies. We did our best.
See you next week.
See you next week.